Look, lady, just patch the panel and stay out of the way. This isn't some crop duster you're used to fixing. The words, sharp and dismissive, cut through the cold Nevada air, echoing slightly in the cavernous hangar. A few of the younger airmen, clad in olive-drab jumpsuits, snickered into their hands. They stood in a semicircle around the magnificent, lethal geometry of the F-22 Raptor, its stealth-coated skin absorbing the harsh fluorescent light. At the center of their attention was Lieutenant Commander Hotshot Evans, a man whose call sign was less an affectionate nickname and more a clinical diagnosis of his personality. He leaned against the fuselage of his billion-dollar bird, arms crossed, a smirk playing on his lips as he addressed the civilian mechanic. She was older, perhaps in her late 40s, with strands of gray feathering at her temples and a web of fine lines around her eyes. Her hands, stained with hydraulic fluid and grease, moved with a steady, unhurried rhythm as she inspected a hydraulic line. She didn't look up. She didn't flinch. She simply paused her work for a half-second, a silent acknowledgement that sound had occurred in her vicinity, and then continued her diagnostic sequence. But the colonel, watching from the control tower balcony, saw something else. He saw the woman's stance, the way her weight was perfectly centered, her posture radiating a stillness that was not passive, but coiled. If you believe true strength is found in silence, type competence below. The mechanic, Evelyn Reed, offered no retort. Her world was one of tolerances, pressure gradients, and the quiet language of stressed metal. The loud, preening world of pilot egos was just background noise, like the distant whine of a turbine spinning up. Evans, emboldened by her silence, pressed his advantage. Seriously, he said, turning to his audience of young, impressionable wingmen. They send us the best war machine on the planet and contract out the maintenance to this. My grandpa's tractor gets more respect. The laughter was louder this time, a chorus of nervous agreement from those who orbited Evans's gravitational pull of arrogance. Evelyn finished her check, her fingers tracing the line with a sensitivity that seemed to see through the metal. She picked up her torque wrench, its metallic heft familiar in her palm. With 3 precise, efficient motions, she tightened the fittings on the panel Evans had gestured to. Each click of the wrench was a sharp, percussive sound in the hangar, a punctuation mark in the theater of his monologue. She made a small, neat notation on her digital checklist, her expression as placid as a frozen lake. She was invisible, a ghost in a machine shop, a functionary whose only purpose was to serve the glorious needs of the warriors. This was the assumption they all made. It was a comfortable assumption. It was a profoundly, dangerously wrong assumption. Her silence was not submission. It was a fortress, built over 15 years of deliberate obscurity, a wall behind which a completely different person lived, a person they could not possibly comprehend. Hours later, the sky was a canvas of flawless, piercing blue. Lieutenant Commander Evans was a god in this domain, his F-22 a thunderbolt in his hand. He carved through the air at Mach 15, the desert floor a wrinkled map thousands of feet below. It was during a high G turn, a maneuver designed to show off the Raptor's impossible agility to a training squadron, that his world fractured. A shrill alarm blared through his helmet's headset, a screech of digital panic. A cascade of amber and red warnings flooded his cockpit display. Landing gear failure. The synthesized voice announced, devoid of emotion. Port main gear unlocked. Evans's blood ran cold. He eased off the throttle, his muscle memory taking over. He cycled the gear. Nothing. He tried the emergency override. A sickening groan of hydraulics, but the indicator light remained stubbornly red. He was flying the most advanced fighter jet in the world, and a single $10 pin had decided not to seat, turning his chariot of the gods into a $200 million coffin. Mayday, 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 he transmitted, his voice tighter, higher than he would ever want to admit. Raptor 1 is declaring an emergency. Port main gear is unresponsive. I am unable to get a down and locked indication. On the ground, the calm professionalism of the control tower shattered. A dozen voices began talking at once. Checklists were flipped, and emergency crews scrambled. The specter of a belly landing, a catastrophic, fiery skid down the runway, loomed over them all. In the maintenance bay, the emergency chatter crackled over the ground crew's comms network. Mechanics and technicians gathered around the speaker, their faces etched with concern. But Evelyn Reed stood apart, her head cocked slightly, listening with an intensity that seemed to block out all other stimuli. She closed her eyes for a moment, not in prayer, but in calculation. In her mind, she was no longer in the hangar. She was inside the Raptor's landing gear assembly, visualizing the hydraulic schematics, the actuator pathways, the locking mechanism. She saw the flaw she had noted that morning, a minuscule variance in a pressure valve that the system diagnostics had dismissed as within acceptable limits. She knew it wasn't. She walked with a calm, deliberate pace from the hangar to the base operations building, up the stairs to the control tower, the rising panic of the radio calls washing over her without effect. She stepped into the glass-walled room, a quiet island in a sea of controlled chaos. The flight director, a captain with sweat beading on his forehead, saw her and waved a dismissive hand. "Not now, ma'am. We have a situation." Evelyn ignored him. She stepped up to an open comms panel, pressed the transmit button, and spoke, her voice a stark, clear signal in the noise. "Raptor 1, this is ground maintenance. State your current hydraulic pressure reading on the port main gear actuator." Her tone wasn't a suggestion. It was a command. A wave of stunned silence washed over the tower. Over the radio, Evans's voice shot back, laced with a new kind of panic, the fury of a man whose authority was being questioned in his moment of crisis. "Who the hell is this? Get this civilian off the channel now." Before the flight director could intervene, a new voice, deep and resonant with unquestionable authority, filled the room. "Negative. All channels. Hold your traffic." Colonel Miles, the base commander, stepped into the center of the tower. He had been monitoring from his office, and the moment he heard that calm, precise female voice, a memory from a classified briefing over a decade ago had clicked into place. The voice of a ghost, a legend he'd only read about in a heavily redacted after-action report. He took the headset from the stunned flight director. "Raptor 1, this is Colonel Miles," he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "You will listen to the technician on the ground. You will execute her instructions to the letter. Is that understood?" The silence on the other end was a confession of shock and confusion. "Understood, sir," Evans finally stammered. Colonel Miles nodded to Evelyn. The floor was hers. "Pilot," she began, her voice unchanged, a surgeon dictating instructions during a complex operation. "Your primary sensor is giving a false negative. We are going to force the locking pin into place using physics. Descend to 10,000 feet. Maintain airspeed at 300 knots." Evans, his own expertise now a useless liability, complied without question. He was no longer the master of his aircraft. He was a student in a deadly classroom, and the quiet mechanic was his only instructor. In the tower, Colonel Miles turned to his aide. "Give me the personnel file on civilian contractor Evelyn Reed. Everything, including the sealed service record." As the aide scrambled to the terminal, Evelyn continued her instructions, her voice a lifeline across the airwaves. "You are going to perform a high-G negative pitchover. It will be violent. The airframe will protest. Ignore it. On my mark, push the stick forward hard and hold for 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. Mark. In the sky, the F-22, a creature of graceful lethality, suddenly became a bucking beast. It pitched forward violently, seemingly trying to throw its pilot from the sky. Evans grunted against the crushing force of the negative GS, his vision tunneling, the jet groaning in protest. In the tower, everyone held their breath, their eyes glued to the radar screen and the telemetry data. For 3 eternal seconds, there was only the sound of Evans's strained breathing over the comms. Then, a sound, clear and beautiful, echoed from the speakers, a loud, metallic clunk. On the main display, a single red light on the landing gear schematic blinked once, then turned a solid, reassuring green. "Port gear is down and locked," Evans gasped, his voice a mixture of relief and pure, unadulterated awe. "Raptor 1 has 3 green." A wave of exhaled breaths and quiet cheers filled the tower. At that exact moment, the aide handed Colonel Miles a tablet displaying Evelyn Reed's file. The colonel scrolled past her recent certifications as an aviation mechanic. He tapped the icon for her sealed military record. A red warning flashed. Eyes only, TS/SCI clearance required. He overrode it with his command credentials. The screen filled with text, a history so extraordinary it felt like fiction. Unit, Naval Special Warfare Development Group. He read under his breath, his eyes widening. Rate, Master Chief Petty Officer. Specialty, Sniper, Advanced Reconnaissance, Covert Technical Exploitation. Deployments, Classified. Commendations, Navy Cross, Silver Star with 2 clusters, Bronze Star with Valor. My God, he looked up at Evelyn, who was now quietly wiping her hands with a rag, as if she had just finished a simple oil change. The F-22 touched down with the delicate grace of a dragonfly, its tires kissing the asphalt with a gentle puff of white smoke. The emergency crews, no longer needed, stood down, watching in respectful silence. Lieutenant Commander Evans taxied the aircraft not to its designated hardstand, but directly toward the maintenance bay where Evelyn was already methodically putting her tools away. He powered down the engines, the roar of the turbines spooling down into an almost deafening silence. The canopy hissed open, and Evans emerged, his movements slow, deliberate. He unstrapped himself and climbed down the ladder, his boots hitting the concrete with a soft thud. He didn't speak to the ground crew chief who approached him. He didn't speak to anyone. He walked across the tarmac, his helmet under his arm, his eyes locked on the unassuming figure of the woman who had just saved his life and his aircraft. He stopped a few feet in front of her. The entire flight line seemed to hold its collective breath. Evans, the embodiment of loud, unshakable confidence, looked completely undone. His arrogance had been stripped away at 30,000 feet, replaced by a profound, humbling respect. He stood at attention, brought his heels together, and executed a slow, perfect salute. It wasn't the casual gesture between officers. It was the deep, reverent salute one reserves for a Medal of Honor recipient or a fallen hero. "Ma'am," he said, his voice clear and steady, all traces of his former swagger gone. "Thank you. I was wrong." Evelyn simply met his gaze, gave a short, almost imperceptible nod, and went back to cleaning a wrench. For her, the job was done. The story of the quiet mechanic and the humbled hotshot pilot became the stuff of instant legend. It didn't spread through official channels, but through the base's true information network. The gossip in the barracks, the whispers in the chow hall, the hushed conversations on the flight line. They called her the Ghost, or the Master Chief. Pilots, who once wouldn't have given her a second glance, now changed their course to walk past her workstation, offering a nod of respect. Some of the younger ones, emboldened by a newfound humility, would approach her with genuine questions, not about regulations, but about the feel of an aircraft, its hidden language. She answered them in her usual way, with few words, but with a depth of knowledge that was staggering. Hotshot Evans became her most fervent disciple. The incident had fundamentally rewired him. He was still a brilliant pilot, but the arrogance was gone, replaced by a quiet, watchful competence. He was overheard one evening, talking to a group of new lieutenants fresh from flight school. "Let me tell you something they don't teach you in training," he said, his voice low. "The loudest person in the room is usually the most insecure. Look for the quiet ones. The ones who just do the work. The ones who don't need to tell you how good they are. They're the ones who have earned their silence. They're the ones you listen to when everything goes to hell." The culture on the base began a subtle but powerful shift, away from performative confidence and toward a deeper appreciation for demonstrated, quiet professionalism. Months later, a small ceremony was held in the pilot's briefing room. Colonel Miles unveiled a new plaque on the wall. It wasn't for a pilot or a fallen soldier. It was a framed, gold-plated schematic of the F-22's main landing gear assembly. Beneath it, a simple brass plate read, "The Reed Maneuver," in recognition of Evelyn Reed, whose quiet competence and legendary expertise saved Raptor 71. Let this serve as a permanent reminder. Respect is earned, not given. The maneuver was now a part of the unofficial training syllabus on base, a last-ditch procedure taught in simulators, a testament to the day a civilian mechanic reminded an entire air wing what true mastery looked like. Evelyn, who had politely declined to attend the ceremony, was exactly where she preferred to be, in the hangar, her hands covered in grease. She was standing with a group of young A&P mechanics, the next generation. She wasn't lecturing them. She was showing them, guiding their hands as they learned to feel the subtle vibrations in a bearing, to hear the whisper of a faulty valve. Her legacy wasn't going to be a plaque on a wall. Her legacy was in their hands, in the knowledge she passed on, in the new standard of excellence she had set not with words or with boasts, but with a single, undeniable act of supreme competence. Her silence was now understood not as weakness, but as the calm at the center of a storm of experience. True strength is rarely loud. It doesn't announce its arrival with bluster and bravado. It doesn't demand respect. It commands it through action. It resides in the quiet corners, in the steady hands of the professional, in the calm mind that sees the solution while others are still defining the problem. For 15 years, Evelyn Reed had hidden her past, not out of shame, but because the validation she required was internal. The medals, the commendations, the secret history, they were artifacts of a life she had left behind. Her worth was not defined by what she had been, but by what she could do, right here, right now. The world is full of noise, of people shouting to be heard, desperate to prove their value through volume. But legacy is not built on noise. It is forged in the crucible of crisis, proven in the silence of absolute focus, and measured by the lives you touch and the standards you inspire. It's a quiet truth that the most dangerous person in the room is often the one you notice last, the one who has nothing to prove to anyone but themselves. Their competence is their voice, their precision is their argument, and their results are their undeniable legacy. For more stories where quiet competence triumphs over loud assumption and where silent professionalism defines their worth, subscribe to Unknown Heroine Stories.